closed captioning provided by Beaufort County.
Appreciate all of you all being here this morning. Let's call this meeting to order of the Beaufort Legislative Delegation. As we start the meeting, let me point out that Senator Campson has given his proxy to Representative Erickson. Senator Davis has given his proxy to Representative Herb Kurzman, and Senator Matthews has given her proxy to Mr. Rivers. Without the proxies, we do have a quorum of the members of the delegation present, obviously with the proxies substantial over the quorum requirement. The first is an invocation and pledge of allegiance. Mr. Rivers, if I could call on you for an invocation, please, sir, and then we'll move into the pledge. If you all will stand. Thank you, sir.
Let us pray. Heavenly Father, we thank you for this morning. We thank you for this day. We thank you for this opportunity. We thank you in advance that we'll be doing everything decent and in order for the constituents, the people that we work for in Beaufort County. All is well and well indeed. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen.
Amen. Thank you. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Ladies and gentlemen, the first matter on our agenda this morning is a presentation from South Carolina Beach Advocates, Nicole Elko. Good morning and welcome.
Hey, Nicole. All right, thanks for having me. My name is Nicole Elko. I'm the Executive Director of the South Carolina Beach Advocates. We are the only nonprofit organization in the state that was formed by the local elected officials of the beachfront communities to represent with one voice in Columbia and beyond. And our board of directors is made up of the mayors and administrators of the beach communities from North Myrtle Beach down here to Hilton Head. So the handout I have before you today represents one of the things that our organization was formed to do. So we formed back in 2014. Many of you have received invitations to our annual meetings, which we hold, in various beach locations around the state. So the purpose of my visit today is just to say hello, introduce our organization, and welcome you to, join us at these annual meetings that we have. We had our last one on Kiowa in January, February timeframe. And what happens there is all the beachfront communities come together. We will certainly extend the invitation to you all to come and speak with us and share your view of kind of the outlook for beaches for the upcoming year. And just wanted to, again, draw your attention to this bill that Senator Campson has introduced, and it is moving, Senate Bill 106. And this is a dedicated state fund for beach preservation. So one of the things, in our state, the beaches are extremely important for tourism. There's some statistics on the front here that in 2019, basically $9 billion was brought in the 5 coastal counties alone. And, really I'm preaching to the choir here. You all know the benefits of tourism and why people are coming here to visit. So if you can kind of help us spread this message to the upstate, to your peers in the upstate, that would be fantastic. What this bill does, similar statistics about tourism. So the bill does that. It basically takes it away from OCRM, which because of the DHEC restructure is a bit of chaotic right now anyway. So we're moving it to PRT, that's where the beach funding has been coming through recently. And then secondly, it does something which is really important, which is dedicates 25% of our admissions taxes into this fund annually. So that amounts to about $8 million a year. And the admissions tax is the tax that you pay when you go to the movies or go golfing. So we think of it really as a user fee. Right? When tourists are coming into the state and paying that tax, they're basically putting money into the fund that will then help to maintain the beaches over time. So just one last thing to, again, bring home the point here. So it's putting away million a year, but the coastal counties are generating $9 billion a year. So it's a fantastic return on investment to maintain that, what we call critical infrastructure of the beaches for tourism, and then of course for all the other benefits that it provides with storm protection, the buffer for hurricanes, as well as the ecosystem benefits. So in the past, we had basically put money, we basically allocate money as needed, and a lot of times it's on an emergency basis. So Governor McMaster set aside about $48 million in all between 17 and 19, and that kind of renourished all the beaches. We're going to need another about that amount, around $50 million coming up here in a few years. So the idea of this is to put away a little bit every year rather than having to pull from the general fund that massive amount of money, every 8 or 10 years. And with that, I will conclude and ask you if you have any questions.
Yes, sir. Representative Elko. It ought to be on. Green.
All right. Your newfangled one. Nicole, thanks for coming up here.
Yeah.
Good to see you.
Me too.
So, and I'm sorry, I should know more about this Campson's bill, but where is that right now?
So I was hoping he would be here to give an exact update, but it has moved out of subcommittee and then out of his Fish and Game Committee. So it's ready to go on to the next step.
So that's not going to make crossover this year, is that right?
It's probably not looking
So
like it.
I think we still have an opportunity with S2, the reorganization of DHEC and mental health. And I think this would be germane to that bill.
Correct.
So maybe we can move it along a little bit further in that, as an amendment in that in subcommittee.
That would be wonderful.
So, okay.
At least we could accomplish the movement of the fund, if not the funding
Would you
of
be
the
available to
fund.
come up there during that hearing too?
Absolutely.
Okay, great. Thanks, Nicole.
Yes, thank you.
Other questions? Nicole, when you say that the number of about 50 million will be needed in the next couple of years, are there estimates as to what those numbers are now?
Yep, so the plot that you have in the bottom left-hand corner of this shows a rough estimate, and we actually are working with PRT right now and talking with all the communities about their exact needs, so we'll have some more specific numbers. But it will be about 50 million in 28, 29. The state funding number.
Okay. All right.
Yep. And I would also point out on that side, in terms of like taking the message to the upstate peers, the map of South Carolina there shows beachfront ownership. So everyone, the darker the blue, the more people that own second homes along the South Carolina coast. So, the whole state really, the beaches belong to all of us. So someone in every county in the state owns a beach house, a second home, and someone in every state in the nation owns a beach house in South Carolina. So this really is a state and a national issue, and I appreciate your attention to it.
Thank you. I appreciate, this is great work. I mean, the tourism obviously is, if not one of South Carolina's most significant activities and industries. And, for many years, we struggled to get recognition along the coast for highway funding, especially in this part of the state. And this is as significant in many respects as highway infrastructure. So you are in part preaching to a choir here. But thank you and appreciate you being here. Ladies and gentlemen, I skipped over the approval of the minutes for our June 18, 2021 meeting that were included in your packet. Are there any questions or comments?
No, sir. Move for passage.
All right. Motion for approval. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any noes? Everybody's in favor. Ms. Maxey, thank you. Okay. The next, we have our Chairman of County Council, Mr. Passiment, and our County Administrator, Mr. Greenway, here to visit with us about Regional Transportation Authority. Gentlemen, good morning and welcome.
Morning.
Thanks for having us.
Yes. Okay. We have been working with the Savannah-Chatham Area Transportation Committee for several months now about a ferry service that would bring ferries from Savannah to various areas in Beaufort County. And one of the things that we have learned is that we need a point person on our side, and that would be Palmetto Breeze. And so we're here to talk about what we would have to do in the Transportation Authority law to ensure that they could be our point person for the transportation that we need, and I'll let Eric fill in some of the information.
Yeah, in addition, we're also, as you all are aware, many of you have received calls over the last several months about our current ferry situation with our Defusky Island residents and tourism to that island. In order for us to solve that problem, we're trying to achieve a long-term solution, because over the past many years, it's just been a temporary contract with a private carrier. We would also like to enter into a long-term arrangement with Palmetto Breeze to actually take over eventually the operation of passenger ferry services in Beaufort County. What that would do is it would allow Palmetto Breeze to access state and federal grant money for ferry operations. So, but their transportation authority right now can't do that, because the current state law only limits transportation authorities to surface transportation facilities. So we would need, and I think I emailed the language, what we would need for Code Section 58-25-2010 to be revised to say that public transportation means every conveyance of human passengers by bus, van, ferry, or any other surface or waterborne vehicle. So if you all could entertain at some point introducing that legislation on behalf of the county, that would help us develop a more thorough long-term solution to dealing with the ferry situation here in Beaufort County, and also as we partner with Chatham County to provide more tourist opportunities to use the ferry service back and forth between Beaufort County and Savannah. We actually also think that long-term that this might be an additional transportation solution for some of our more northern residents who work in the southern part of the county, that if we could actually have a passenger ferry to allow those folks to be able to access their places of employment south, Hilton Head and places like that, that would be a great solution as well, instead of them having to ride buses or take their own vehicles down every morning. Many of those residents have to get up very, very early in the morning in order to go to work, and they're there late at night. So anyway, that's all I have, unless you have any questions.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Greenway, do you guys have language you could leave with us that we could evaluate?
We do.
Okay.
Yeah, we do.
Yeah, and my second question on the follow-up on that is, with that language, I mean, would that be, Weston, would that be local legislation? I know it's dealing with an authority, so no. Okay.
5825-20 is not. I will, I'm looking at the email that you all, with Kirk Taylor, county attorney, sent. If you all will, what he suggested is including language about ferry or other surface or waterborne vehicle, but he left the language that says as required for intrastate service.
Okay.
I just heard you all say something about ferries between Savannah and Georgia, so,
Yeah.
I mean, this does not. No.
Right.
So,
We'll
if you'll
add
ask
that.
him to address, I don't have the whole statute in front of me, obviously, just you all's email, but
Right.
when I looked at that and heard you say across state lines, obviously that doesn't fix that issue.
Yeah, we'll provide a more thorough response to you all. I wanted to make sure you all were amenable to looking into this for us, and then we'll give you the language that's necessary to clean it all up.
Absolutely. Great idea. Tell me, when you say make them the point person, just make them the entity that's responsible for this? I mean, the county could do this today, right?
Well, we could
Not
do it.
necessarily under this.
We could do it today, but they wouldn't be able to access any of the federal grant and state grant money that's out there for ferry operations, because of the fact that they're not able to access that, because the current language doesn't allow their authority to take over the ferry service. But as a regional transportation authority, if we change this language, then I understand it frees them up to apply for grant money at the federal level through federal highway or federal transportation dollars to actually have money for the ferry. Currently, we're spending about $500,000 a year out of county coffers, out of general fund, to operate the ferry to Defusky Island. And we don't have a really good long-term solution for that. We're trying to secure permanent embarkation points on both Defusky Island and the county, and we're working toward that end. And once we get those two things established, then we will be able to solve once and for all the ferry operation issue for Defusky Island. And Mr. Representative Newton, I don't think I have to tell you, you probably dealt with that when you were on Beaufort County Council as well a few times. So it's a big need for us to solve. Defusky Island is growing. They had 100,000 tourists last year. They project that to be 120,000 this year. So it's a big need that we need to try to solve and find a permanent solution for.
Go ahead, yes, Mr. President.
Thank you. What kind of volume of dollars are you looking at right now? Just, I'm not something I'm trying to hold you to, but what are you looking at for some sort of ferry embarkation site for Defusky Island?
You talking about for purchasing the properties?
Yes.
Yeah, it'll be probably around 15 to 20 million by the time we get both things secured on both sides.
And what are you thinking, the $500,000's out the window, and that's going to be $1 million or $2 million on an annual basis?
Yes.
And what time length into the future that when are you looking at those numbers coming up?
The purchase of the embarkation points are immediate. We're trying to do those now. And hopefully we're going to be able to buy land that will allow us to generate additional revenue from those embarkation points to help offset the cost of the ferry operation. So the purchase of the land is, we're researching that right now. Getting it established with Palmetto Breeze to be the actual operator of the ferry down the road would be after this legislation would get adopted in a couple of years.
And one last question, did I miss something, or are you looking at us to try and help you with that?
I'm not looking for you all to help us with the purchase of the land.
Okay.
So
just the language at this point.
we just need the language amended at this point to include waterborne transportation, to allow Transportation Authority to take over that service. Palmetto Breezes Board is already established, so if they could just take over that, then that's going to be a long-term solution for us that we would like to have in our toolkit. I'm not saying that we've decided that we're going to do that or what the best thing is, but I wanted to go ahead and talk to you all about us getting this started, because I think it's going to be good for the state long term, because I think ferry services along the coast, I think it's something you all are going to hear more and more about as a viable option. Chatham County, Chats over in Chatham County, they operate the ferry that goes across the Savannah River to the island now, and they can do that underneath their legislation. So I think it just makes sense for us to modify the language.
Okay. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
There used to be a ferry system operated in Sandy Island. Is that still, either of you all have any idea?
It is still, yeah. Yeah.
And is,
I don't know how it's set up or the process of set up.
yeah, I don't know that that's a regional authority or not, but I'm curious. I'm sure they try to get grant money as well.
Yeah, I don't know the way I understand it is there is no ferry operation in the state of South Carolina that is able to access those federal grant dollars and that federal funding for ferry operations.
Interesting.
So
That may be something to look into, because I think the one at Sandy Island is actually a DOT ferry system.
it may be.
And I suspect they probably figure out a way to.
Yeah.
Mr. Chairman, maybe through the school district too. I know they do it some for the schools.
Right.
I can ask, and I'll get the administrator.
Thank you.
Thank you. Gentlemen, thank you all very much
you.
for
Appreciate your time.
being here. We appreciate it. Look forward to working with you on that issue. Ms. Brittanee Fields. Good morning.
Good morning. Thank you for having me today. My name is Brittanee Fields. I'm the Capital Projects Coordinator for Beaufort County. I'm here requesting a letter of support for Beaufort County's application to the RAISE grant for $25 million for the project of US 21 SC 802 corridor improvements. This project is a part of the 2018 1-cent sales tax referendum for $30 million on Ladies Island to be expended for traffic improvements. One of the 9 projects is the overall corridor. So we're seeking additional funds. This will be our second application. Last time we came highly recommended to the Secretary, but unfortunately we're not selected. So this time we're hoping that we are. So we're reapplying. The due date's April 14th.
Questions? Tell me, Ms. Bradley.
You went through that pretty fast.
I'm sorry. I'm a fast speaker.
I just want to get my feet on the ground on this. The 30 million that we were talking about is what we agreed to, which is part of the bridge system coming over to Hilton Head, that whole tax event, right?
Yeah, so the 2018 sales tax referendum had 3 different projects. One was the US 278, that was $80 million. One was Ladies Island improvements, that's 9 sub-projects, that was $30 million. And then $10 million was dedicated to pathways and sidewalks throughout the county.
And what you're talking about is the $30 million.
This is one of the projects in the $30 million allocation. We're looking at about $72 million altogether for all 9 of those projects, so we are underfunded, and this is one of the funding sources that we can apply to meet that match.
And what are you asking us today?
A letter of support for
That's
Beaufort
what I
County
thought.
to
You said
apply
that
to the
up
RAISE
front,
grant.
right? Yeah, okay. Do we need to make a motion for that?
Well, we will, but let's see if there are any other questions.
Mr. Rivers, Mr. Erickson, y'all got, so how much is the grant you're applying for?
The grant will be $25 million.
Okay. And it's a RISE grant with who?
SCDOT.
And is, I heard you say April 14th is your,
Application deadline.
all right, and do you know the amount of money in the grant cycle?
I'm not sure about this year.
Okay. Do you know it's at
I
least
think it's 9.9 billion.
9.9 billion?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Does that number sound right to you?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Huh?
I think if it's approved, we can get Representative Erickson to hand walk this, or hand walk it. She can hand walk it if she wants, but walk it over and deliver it by hand. That's her part of the budget. I think that would carry a lot of additional weight on that.
I'm happy to do that if the delegation would like me to.
Well, I'm happy to look to my right for a motion, but since this is you all's part of the county, can I look to my left?
Yes, sir, I would make a motion that we write a letter in support of the grant process.
Thank you. Any questions or comments?
Second.
You got it? Thank you all, my NOBs here today. Better than if I'd called you the other. We did.
Yes, we did.
So, all those in favor of approval say aye.
Aye.
Including the proxy holders for those senators that are not here. Is that a yes?
Yes.
Are there any opposed? Hearing none, it is unanimously approved.
Thank you.
Thank you. We appreciate you being here. Van, I think you're up. Town of Port Royal Navy Heritage Park Fitness Station installation.
Yes, sir. I believe y'all have a copy of the application.
We do.
I know that there's an allocation for Beaufort County for parks and recreational facilities, or excuse me, for projects. This would add fitness centers to the Naval Heritage Park. I don't know if you've followed kind of what we've been doing with Naval Heritage Park. We relocated the Pinckney Porter Chapel there. We have an agreement with the National Park Service to host for the reconstruction park. So we're doing constant improvements. One of the things we've been working on since 2016 is the addition of a section of sidewalk from Rebo Road to the park that would connect it to the bridge. And you've probably seen lots of people that walk over that bridge. So this is an opportunity to kind of enhance the fitness opportunities for people in Port Royal that also walk the bridge as well. And so the Parks and Recreation Commission, I have the liaison, if you will, from town council here with me. I didn't realize he was coming, so now I have to pull through with this anyways. So the Parks and Recreation Commission endorsed the idea of the fitness addition to the park, asked me to pursue any sort of grant funding that I could find. Obviously, this is one that gets allocated on an annual basis, so here I am making that request. Obviously, the town will provide the match for the balance of that project.
Okay. Questions?
Just a comment, Mr. Chairman.
Yeah, let's, Ms. Maxey, do you know what the current level of PARD funding
Right here.
available?
It's on your front sheet.
Hold on. It's not in this.
It is. Well, right here.
Okay, and that's in the package that I had at home, or the package that, because I didn't see it, the package I had at home. Got it. Okay.
So that it's correct.
Sorry.
That's okay. Just current.
I just want to see that number.
79, not 646.29.
Okay, all right. And that's the cycle that ends when? I just want to make sure that we did, that, you know, last year in June, we had a balance of 175,000, and we did 125,760 to Beaufort County for the Bladen Street tennis courts. We did City of Beaufort $50,000, Southside Park amenities. We just try to make sure that we allocate these funds sort of equitably throughout the county. We just need to be mindful of the fact that this is 2 years running, that we're spending and allocating this money north of the Broad. We just need to be mindful of that, gang, as we come up to the next cycle of funding. But there'll be additional monies after the budget
Yes.
that comes out this year. So, other questions? Comments? Can I get a motion? Thank you, Mr. Rivers.
Second?
Thank you. Any further discussion? All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Including proxies. Any nays? Thank you.
Thank you very much. I appreciate it.
Thanks very much. Appreciate you being here. Captain Thomas?
Good morning, sir. How are you today?
I'm well. Good morning. Good to have you here.
I am asking for $74,000 for our Marine Division to stock state and recreational shellfish beds throughout Beaufort County. The priorities now are Trunkards out on St. Helena, Broad River, where we have some recreational bed that folks can get to without having to get in a boat and get to them. They can walk from the land in there. They just get depleted over years of use, and this would buy the shell stock where we put out we'll go and put out the oyster shells so that the larvae can attach to it and they can grow. A little bit tough getting the stuff right now, but they do have a line on getting it. It's about 4,000 per load, and we're looking to get close to 20 loads. And you all approved a pretty big portion of it last year as well, and they were able to get most of that out. Like I said, they ran out of shell stock. So there is a little bit of money still sitting there, but they would like to go ahead and try to get on a lot of these beds that are in the county. Broad River and Trunkards are the only two that we're looking at. We're looking at one over here on Hilton Head, and they're also looking at some in Morgan River as well.
Okay. Any questions? It looks like last year we did 132,500, but was the shells for the public shell fishing, replanting, also monofilament recycling station. Was that,
I think that is correct. So I thought it was 60 for the shell, and then we had a law enforcement request, and then we had the monofilament as well. Because you did a boat as well last year, I believe.
Yeah, Cameron. Well, the law enforcement request was for the Pioneer boat. That's from a different.
Yes,
that's from Game and Fish, and the water wreck was 132.
Gotcha. Okay, that makes sense. Yes, sir.
But it covered a number of those things. We also commented, or at least had some brief discussion last year about restroom facilities at boat landings. Is that something, is the county still talking about that at all?
Did you say restroom facilities?
Yeah, some of the county boat landings where there are none.
I know I'm dealing with another one up in up the coast. I think it's Horry County, Georgetown County area. Yeah. And some of the landings that are county owned, the contracts are made between the county and whoever the landowner is, or like George Grand Strand Sewer Water. So I would have to look into those contracts to see if there is something. But that is certainly something that I can ask about and try to get some footing on, and I can get back to you, later today and.
Yeah, well, I'm just curious. I mean, obviously, it's been a long time since I've been on county council, but right. The identified need for there being bathroom facilities at county boat landings is not new. Right. And the county has looked at it at different times and tried to figure out how to fund it. I just know that some of these revenues that are water rec revenues perhaps could be used to help address some of those issues. So I'm like a broken record.
Yeah, no, I'm happy to start that conversation with those guys, and I did find out. So it is a school bus that runs to Sandy Island. I'm trying to find out if it's there. So when I talk to them about that, I'm happy to start that discussion, and we can both get back to you and let you know, because I do agree. Most every land, and especially our bigger ones, could definitely use that asset.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay. Well, I appreciate it. Any further questions? The grant request is for $74,400. Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
You said you were talking about 20 loads, right?
Yes, sir.
How much volume of material is that? And you're talking about oyster shells,
It would
right?
cover about 6 acres, that's it, of actual shell bank that we're recycling. That's how thick they blow it out, and I think it's like 5.82, because that was one of the questions. Obviously, this is a Marine Division request, so tried to get as much knowledge about it. And over the years, I've gained more. But you would think 20 loads would cover all of Broad River and all of Beaufort County, but it's really only about 6 acres of actual bed, approved beds that they would be able to do with the $74,000.
So is it like a load is a single truckload?
Yes, sir, that's correct. It comes in dump trucks, and they put it on a barge, and then they'll take the barge out to the site, and then they'll blow it off with like a big water nozzle. They blow the shell up onto the bank, and then that's what the larvae attaches to. And and there's also existing shell there that helps us bind and get better habitat for them. But it's it's not as many acres as I thought. But the goal, I think initially 3 years ago, was to get up to 20 acres of beds done. So
Is this at all working with the foundation on Hilton Head that's trying to do the similar type work? Is there any coordination with that?
I'm not sure about that.
Do you have any thoughts on that?
Absolutely, I'll be here after, so we can.
Good. Maybe you guys could connect and.
That's right. And I can definitely get her with our shellfish, get her in touch with our shellfish folks, and
That would be appreciated.
Absolutely. That's right. That's exactly what they're doing. They're just trying to do it in these areas where they open the pick. And one thing, I know you're on a hurry. One quick thing. We did change our seasons last year. The folks over in MRD, they saw there's over harvesting going on. Commercial guys are coming in and over harvesting some of these areas. So they really limited the seasons. We broke our season up. Traditionally, I've been here 21 years, and it's been a mid-season split. Well, now we're doing like 3 splits so that they don't have as long to pick on the beds in order to regenerate and try to let these state beds and recreational beds really recoup and come back. So,
Okay, good, thank you.
One comment. Mike Paul, I got to say, in a different note, the Representative Newton and I obviously live close to the May, so we are getting great comments from our folks who, you rarely get good comments. You get more complaints than anything else, but good comments on the law enforcement on the from DNR.
yeah, I think the wake zone it worked down here.
Yeah, and just the presence, I think, and other than the hooligans from Savannah over at DeFusky, I think it's
right. That's right. That's right. Well, and y'all, as y'all well know, we appreciate all the support y'all have given us in law enforcement and our whole agency. But we're getting more folks down here, so more people, more people out there, it makes a big difference.
Yeah, the cordiality of your officers to the folks, the local folks, and all that is really noticed.
I'm always glad to hear that. For sure.
Thank you, sir.
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The oyster beds, obviously, we're getting a lot more people, we're getting a lot more use of them, and that's a good thing. Is our harvesting of our farmed oysters helping a little bit with that? Okay.
Absolutely.
It's
That certainly takes the pressure off.
Okay.
And even some of our mariculture folks who do that, they're still harvesting on these on these state shellfish grounds and selling, clusters or whatnot. However, when they were doing X number of bushels 5 years ago, now they're probably doing a third of that, maybe a quarter of that, because they're selling, the mariculture business has taken off so well. And so I think that pressure is a huge help as well. And so it may give the marine folks, a jump start to really get these beds back going so that, everybody else can get out and get them
Good,
too.
and our water quality is good as well?
Yes, ma'am.
Good.
DHEC stays on top of that, and they let us know of any closures. I think the only closure we had this past year is Battery Creek to a sewage spill, but everything else seems pretty well. So.
Perfect, thank you.
Yes, ma'am.
Mr. Chairman, I'd move to accept the $74,000 request.
Thank you. Second?
Yep, sir.
Any
Thank
questions or comments? All those in favor of approval say aye.
Aye.
Including proxies. Any noes? Unanimously approved. Thank you very much.
Thank y'all.
Appreciate you being here. Okay. Ladies and gentlemen, the next item on our agenda is the discussion of the process of going through interviews or applications relative to the Veterans Affairs Director position. Each of you all should have received from Ms. Maxey. The position was noticed in the paper. Applications have been submitted, a number of those. I think, Mr. Wedler, yours included among those, if I'm not mistaken. No. If not, and you do want to be part of that process, please make sure that you do submit the appropriate paperwork or talk to Ms. Maxey about whatever paperwork you have that's in there. I appreciate that. Obviously, the Senate intended to be here today. They have gone back into session. We thought they were going to be on recess this week. We did not intend to hold interviews this week. But if you all will recall, this is a position that does require some lead time to get up to speed, to learn as to what has to be done. There might be some education and working alongside Mr. Wedler's appointment based on Mr. Grimsley's letter of January 28th of this year is that appointment was extended until a successor chosen by the delegation has assumed the duties or June 30, 23, whichever occurs earlier. So if you all will take a look at those applications that are included, make sure you have a complete package of those from Ms. Maxey, and then we will look to develop some sort of interview schedule. We've not done this before that I'm aware of as a delegation. I know we have in Jasper County. I don't think, Mr. Wedler, when you first came on, I think you may have been the only interview we conducted at that point in time. I'm not certain, but Ms. Erickson reminded me of that earlier today. But if you all will, take a look at the applications. It may be the appropriate thing is to identify the handful that each of you all would like, or one or more, to interview, and then we might coordinate with Ms. Erickson as Secretary of the Delegation of helping coordinate and schedule when we would look to have interviews. Any questions? Everybody good? You understand where we are? Mr. Rivers, you good? Yes. Okay. Thank you all. And Ms. Maxey, if you'll make sure everybody has copies of, I know they were emailed, but that has copies of all of them, including any paperwork Mr. Wedler has as well. Okay. Beaufort Jasper Higher Ed. Looks like we have, I think we have Ms. Dorr recently resigned and Ms. Banner recently resigned. If you all look at the information that's included, we don't have any applications, Ms. Maxey, if I'm correct, at this point, notwithstanding the fact they have been advertised for these potential vacancies. So this is included in here as much, if anything. I know Mr. Pierce's term expires in June. Ms. Dorr's term is set to expire in June. Dr. Banner's term expired in June. Those are the two resignations. And that's it. Has Mr. Pierce indicated whether he wants to continue to serve? Okay. All the vacancies were, however, and upcoming vacancies included in the newspaper request. I hate to vote on it if he doesn't want to do it. He's the chairman. But will you send him a letter and ask him for us to advise of his interest? And also, Ms. Maxey, we probably need to reach out to Dr. Panu. And also perhaps the current members of the Beaufort Jasper Higher Education Commission, make sure they're aware of the two resignations. With COVID, I don't know when the last time they've met, but they may know of someone who just has not submitted an application yet. Any other questions or thoughts?
From TCL as well.
He's on here?
No, I said perhaps we could reach out to him.
Oh, yeah. Okay, we can certainly do that. Any other comments, questions, thoughts?
Just a comment. I think it'd be coming upon us to maybe set a meeting up with the Beaufort Jasper Water, the board now, and talk to them, because I think constituent comments are not good on this. So, I mean, oh, I'm sorry, I'm sorry. This is on the top of mine, so I'll get to that when we get to that.
Got it, okay.
Yeah.
All right. Any other questions or thoughts or comments about Beaufort Jasper Higher Ed?
We will work on it.
Okay. Obviously, Mr. Passiment, Chairman, and Mr. Greenway, y'all are hearing as well. Obviously, we've got, if you all know of individuals, I know through you all's pretty extensive board and commission process, folks that may be interested in serving on the Beaufort Jasper Higher Education Commission, it would be, obviously, we're in the recruiting mode. Thank you. Yeah. Okay. All right. Next, Mr. Herb Kurzman, you may have a comment on this. Beaufort Jasper Water and Sewer Authority.
Yeah, I'm good with the recommendation by Port Royal, but I think we may need to have just a sit down with the Water and Sewer Authority board now. We got more comments about that from my constituents than anything else combined. So,
okay,
maybe it's time.
We can certainly, Ms. Maxey, if you'll make a note of that for an upcoming delegation meeting.
Beaufort Jasper Water Authority board. If we can get the whole board together, or whatever we can on that, and talk with them, it'd be kind of nice.
Yes, sir.
I could concur with her. I think that getting some complaints as well.
Mr. Rivers, put it on green, not red.
So I'm having some concerns shared with me as well from Beaufort Jasper Water and Sewer. Okay. So I think that meeting could be very productive.
Good. Okay. Thank you. Thank you very much. Okay, so we have one appointment this morning, Dr. David Strange, Mr. David Strange, excuse me. Mr. Strange will complete the 6-year term of his predecessor, Ms. Brandy Gray, which began July 1, 2021, and will expire July 1, 2027, if appointed. That's the only application that we have received. And this is recommendation from the town of Port Royal. Mr. Willis is back there. And the recommendation letter from the mayor is included in you all's package. Any questions or comments?
Mr. Chairman, I'm looking at the list of board members, and Singleton of Richland expires 7/1/21.
That's a Jasper delegation issue.
I know, I'm just bringing it to your attention since you are on the Jasper delegation.
Fortunately, I'm not chairman of that delegation.
And the also Jasper delegation on bond.
Mm-hmm.
With several of our other members of this this body, Ms. Altman and Bell and Schultz coming up in July of this year.
Yep.
So we have several positions on this board that need attention.
Yep. Well, I can't do much about the Jasper, but I appreciate your, I'll make sure that the Beaufort appointments are on track to be considered. And we'll make sure that those have been, Ms. Maxey, properly advertised in the paper for interest, both for reappointments as well as appointments for each and every seat prior to July 1. So.
With that, I would move that we accept Mr. Strange's appointment.
Thank you, ma'am. Second?
Second.
Any questions, comments? Hearing none, all those in favor of approval, please say aye.
Aye.
As proxies as well. Any no votes? Hearing none, unanimously approved. Okay. Next is the Broad Creek Public Service District Commission. Consideration of reappointment of 4 individuals: James Rowe, John Joseph, Dean Layton, and Thomas Hopkins. Ms. Maxey, all these were advertised for both consideration, not only for reappointments, but for anybody to apply that might have an interest, correct? Okay. And these are, the 4 applications that you got were for reappointments of these seats, is that correct? And none for new appointments? Okay. Thank you. Mr. Rowe and Mr. Joseph will be completing a 3-year term that began July of 21 and expired July of 24 if reappointed. Layton and Hopkins serving a 3-year term that begins July 22 and expires July of 25 if reappointed. Are there any questions or comments? The material backing up these applications and the recommendation are included in the material you've been provided.
Yeah, they go through their own internal process.
Right, they do.
It's pretty thorough.
Yeah.
So no questions.
It is, good?
Yeah.
Okay. Ms. Bradley, is that you making a motion then?
I am.
For expediency purposes for all 4 for the corresponding terms that we discussed?
Yes,
Mr. Kurzman, you got that second? Thank you. Any questions, comments? Hearing none, all those in favor of approval of the 4 appointments for the terms as described, please say aye. Aye. Including proxies, any noes? Hearing none, unanimously approved. Thank you very much. The next are the South Island Public Service District Commission. Consideration of 2 reappointments, Ms. Lightsey and Ms. Ovens. Ms. Lightsey and Ms. Ovens will serve a 3-year term beginning July 1, 2022, expiring July 1, 2025, if reappointed. Ms. Maxey, I do note that there are a handful on here of that appear to have terms that expired in 21. I don't know with that information we need to get from the states. John Phelan, James Richardson, both of those appear, and then also Jim Vaughn's seat appears to be up in 22. 22? Right, so the 2 appointments we're making right now are 22 appointments, but it doesn't look like Mr. Vaughn is in that mix.
The 2 ladies have already submitted their applications, so if you want to hold on those to
No. We're absolutely not. It's hard enough getting this crowd together, and they've been noticed in the paper, and they have submitted, which I want to. But obviously, the one that the at-large appointment that was 7/1/21, Mr. Richardson, we need to reach out to him and confirm that. I mean, that's obviously one that we need to tend to as well.
Mr. Phelan as well.
And Mr. Phelan, that's correct.
Mr. Phelan's has been submitted, we're just waiting, it's pending with the governor's office. It was already voted upon.
And Mr. Richardson's as well, because I thought we dealt with that last year.
Richardson's was.
I thought we did too, the last meeting.
All right, would you, if you would check on that for me. I mean, the records coming out of Columbia are not always as current as we would like. But if you will check on those, please, ma'am, and get back to us. Okay, any further questions? This is South Island Public Service District, Ms. Lightsey and Ms. Ovens. Did you make the motion, Mr. Bradley? Thanks. Mr. Herb Kurzman, you got the second?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Any questions or comments?
I'm not sure what you have there, but Mr. Richardson's term ends July 1st, 2024.
What here says 21, so it
Okay.
may just be that chart needs to be updated. I wanted to say I thought we dealt with that last year. And how about Mr. Phelan, is that the same?
His is the one that's pending.
Okay. Got it.
Okay.
So Ms. Ovens and Ms. Lightsey, then the next time are 2023s. Okay, good. Pending motion is approval of Ms. Lightsey and Ms. Ovens. All those in favor of approval, please say aye.
Aye.
Including proxies, any noes? Hearing none, unanimous. Thank you. Okay, next are the Foster Care Review Board. We have 2 holdover candidates, Conte and Mackey. and consideration of an appointment for Miss Melissa Martin. Ms. Martin will be completing a 4-year term of her predecessor, Ms. Conte, which began December 31, 2018, expiring December 31, 2022, if appointed. And Ms. Conte is still serving, but would like, as indicated, to retire her position. It's also noteworthy that we've got Ms. Graves coming up in June of this year, so we need to make sure we've advertised and reach out to her appropriately as well. You all will see that this is a 5-member board per judicial circuit, and we've got 3 representatives from Beaufort and 2 for Jasper. Ms. Martin is up for appointment for Ms. Conte's term. And that is the only application we have, correct?
Correct.
Okay.
And Mr. Mackey is also still serving, and I have requested applications from both of them, but I have not received any yet.
Okay. And he's in a holdover capacity as well?
Correct.
Right. Okay. Thank you. Any questions?
Yes, sir. Move for pass, move for approval.
Thank you. Second?
So moved.
Mr. Kurzman, all those in favor of approval of Ms. Martin's appointment to fill Ms. Conte's term, please indicate so by say aye.
Aye.
Including proxies, any noes? Thank you, that is unanimous. Okay. The next one's a little more complicated. And this is the Saltwater Recreational Fisheries Advisory Committee. And I say this is a little more complicated. Senator Campson has brought forward some information on this. If you all will look in the your packet, you will see that Thomas Webster from Beaufort is the current chair. He was originally appointed in 2006 with an original expiration date of June 30, 2010. So obviously this is a holdover. Terms are 4 years, and the statutory provisions for this commission actually provide no more than 2 consecutive terms. Theoretically, his term would have ended in June of 2014, but he's the chairman, and DNR has in the past indicated he is valuable to that committee and wanted to stay. So the delegation has not simply passed over this, but has left this in place. As the law provides, you continue to serve until a successor is appointed. There is one applicant, Mr. John Wilcox, and that is the information that Mr. Campson, I believe, has brought forward. I was hoping that Mr. Campson would be here today and we could have a conversation. Mr. Wilcox would be an invaluable member of the committee, but I do note that Mr. Webster is still the chairman of the committee. And I note that all of those gentlemen are, in at least a number of them, in a holdover capacity. So tell me what you all's thoughts, what you want to do. We can certainly move forward with the appointment today, but that is replacing Mr. Webster, who is the current chair. So, yes, sir.
I would move to adjourn debate until the next meeting on this, just because we'd have Chip here, their Senator
Thank
Campson
you.
would be here.
That's why I was hoping somebody would do that, hence the explanation.
Second that.
Good, okay. That was my comment about the Senate not being here. So I appreciate that, Mr. Herb Kurzman. We'll adjourn debate on this one. Ms. Maxey, if you'll send Mr. Campson, Senator Campson, a note that we'd like to visit with him about that, and then also we may need to reach out to Mr. Webster and or DNR about, because this is not a board that's exclusive to our part of the state, and if he continues to serve as chair, but we are appreciative of Mr. Wilcox's willingness to serve and need to try to get him on this board. So, Okay, with that, we are through with our appointments, thank goodness, and moving to the public comment session. I don't know if folks have signed up to speak, and Ms. Maxey has. I do know that we have a number of other elected officials that are here today. Our chairman of our school board is here. I'm so, right. Pleasure to see you, and who else? Mr. Rodman, I see you on the back row. Good to have you. You were hiding back there. I didn't see you. Thank you for being here. Lawson, Ms. Howard, thank you. All y'all are hiding on the back row. I didn't see you back there. But thanks for being here with us this morning. Ms. Maxey, do you have a list of folks that have signed up to speak?
Right here.
Oh. Okay. The first is Ms. Felix with the Board of Voter Registration and Elections.
Yes, sir.
Good morning. Welcome.
Good morning. Thank you. My name is Jean Felix, and I'm the chairman of the Board of Voter Registration and Elections. What I've passed you today, one is a pamphlet on election integrity put out by the SEC, and the other one is a save the date for our legislative session that will take place at the SCARE conference in February. The reason that I wanted to speak with you all today is for some considerations that our Legislative Affairs Committee, along with our entire board, have thought prudent that we wanted to bring to your attention. With me, I bring some of my fellow commissioners, Dr. Caroline Furman, Mr. Ron Clifford, Ms. Aline Mitchell, Ms. Beverly Dorr, and our Executive Director, Marie Smalls. The first one is in regards to 4919 and the early voting. One of the stipulations in that is that the early voting precinct will be open Monday through Saturday for all elections for people to be coming and cast their vote. We were hoping that, right now it's in the Senate subcommittee, but we were hoping that if it made it back to you, that you would consider changing that to just be an open Monday through Saturday for general elections and be an open Monday through Friday for special and municipal elections. And the reason for that is, for example, in May, we have a special election in Hilton Head that only affects a few precincts, but we would have to have even our voter registration office in Beaufort open on Saturday, and no one's going to come all the way to Beaufort to cast their vote for that. So that was one of the stipulations that we wanted you to consider. The other one is in regards to having the early voting precincts open based on square mileage. We're hoping to have that verbiage change considered to just include per number of registered voters in that area, to prevent us from being forced to have an early voting precinct, say in Sheldon, where the number of voters is significantly less than even Ladies Island, St. Helena, or adding another one to the Beaufort Hilton Head area. And finally, with the new census results that have come out, and with us working on re-precincting, the current law in Title VII, Article 3, Section 7-7-710 states that all voting precincts must have a number of 1,500 voters or less per precinct. Well, with the boom that we've had in population in Beaufort County, that is becoming more and more difficult, particularly on the islands and in Hilton Head and Bluffton. We were hoping to have that number increased. We're working, and we understand that won't be in this legislative cycle, but in the future, if you would consider increasing that number to 1,800 or 2,000 voters per precinct, I think that's much more doable for us. That concludes my talking points. Do you have any questions?
Go ahead, Mr. Rivers.
Yes, sir.
Yes, ma'am. Could you elaborate on the square mileage again?
I'm not sure of the exact verbiage, but I know that in 4919 it states that you would have up to 7 early voting precincts based on the square mileage. So so many square mileage, you'd have to have one in that precinct, and so many square mileage, you'd have to have an early voting precinct. But for Beaufort County, at least, most of our population is Hilton Head, Bluffton, and that's where it's booming the most. And then obviously there's been a significant increase on Ladies Island, St. Helena, those areas. So we wanted the verbiage to maybe be changed so that we had the discretion to put it where it would have the most impact for our voters.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
And, Gene, will you all send us something in writing on this?
Absolutely.
So essentially, 3 points you have. One is the early voting centers and the hours. And remember, this is statewide legislation.
Right,
so
I
it's not
understand,
just for Beaufort
yes,
County.
yes,
So,
sir.
the second is the square mileage. I thought that language for the formulas that decided the early voting center was permissive, and that those were caps, not that they were shall.
Okay.
So y'all may want to go back and take a look at that.
Sure.
Because at least my recall was that that was May language.
Okay.
But there were limits on the number that you could have. But,
Right.
you know, I may be,
based on your square mileage of your county, and the impact to the smaller counties is what's a concern, like Colleton County, for example.
I get it, but that's not it's not a concern as you just shared about having to open one in Sheldon for an election.
That was just an example.
Yes. Yeah.
He's talking overall in the state, where the smaller counties are having, based on their square mileage of landmass, they are having to open up, like I mentioned, Colleton County, 4 voting early sites when they only have like, I think 40,000 registered voters. And so that is becoming an issue for smaller counties with 2 staff members.
Right.
Having to hire and train people to run early voting sites, and it could be an isolated area where they may only have 25 registered voters.
Right.
In the rural area.
I still thought that language was permissive, that they didn't have to open them in those locations. But the idea is that you don't get to open 4 centers in one concentrated area of the county that favors one level of voter.
It's a 10-mile.
Period.
10-mile radius.
And, I mean, and so that's the intention of the legislation, is to make this thing fair, but I also thought it was permissive language. But I just want to make sure, I mean, look, we want to make sure that we hear the concerns of Beaufort. While I appreciate concerns in Colleton, I'm not quite as moved by them as I am, just because, right,
Mr. Chairman.
Yes, sir, Mr.
I'm
Rivers.
moved by Beaufort, but I'm moved by Colleton as well.
No, I get that, Mr. Rivers, and I'm not certainly slighting it, but when I'm trying to understand population, what happens in Colleton doesn't necessarily have a direct bearing on this.
May I interject, Mr.
Yeah,
Chairman?
sure, go ahead.
That we should congratulate Ms. Smalls, because she's actually the chair of statewide SCARE, which is all our election commissions. So she's looking out for everybody, and we should thank her.
I got it.
For all that, yes.
I got it.
It's quite an honor for our election commissioner
Yeah.
to hold that statewide election commission director to hold.
Will
that
you send us the
statewide
note
position.
Absolutely.
about,
Yes, sir.
you know, obviously, I don't know what the Senate's going to do with 4919, but that was
Right.
Lucas's bill, the Speaker's bill that there were, and I was among the group that worked on the amendments that brought that forward, you know, under this sort of guise of we're going to have early voting, but we're going to make sure we promote the integrity to have
Right.
check credentials of folks that are voting early, and at the same time, you know, the concept was we're going to make it easier to vote but harder to cheat. And,
Yes.
you know, and I think the body was as committed on a partisan basis to do both. If we're going to make it easier to vote, we're going to make sure we're making it harder to cheat, not one without the other.
Right.
And that was, I think it was a productive legislation that moved forward. Certainly, it was productive on a bipartisan basis. So I didn't mean to say we weren't concerned about the smaller areas, but my focus is this area. Yes, ma'am.
I would just interject that in case the folks in the audience or listening didn't know, that piece of legislation passed the House unanimously.
Yes. Yes,
So
I did know
it
that.
was a key piece of election work that was really across the aisle done together and voted on together and passed together. And we're
Yes,
very
thank you.
proud of that. So the Senate better return it to us.
I hope so, anyway. But if you will, send us those the 3
Absolutely.
points.
Yes, sir.
So that we've got those in moving forward. And I thank you and appreciate you being here.
Thank you.
Everybody good?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Dr. Gwads? former chairman of our Beaufort School Board. At least I got that part right.
Thank you. So good morning. I'm Christina Guad, speaking today as an individual trustee of the Beaufort County Board of Education, and I currently serve as the chair of the board's legislative committee. The Board of Education is pursuing fiscal authority, and I previously addressed this topic with the delegation at the legislative reception at Tabby Walk in June 2021. The Beaufort delegation can approve and introduce legislation for adoption by the General Assembly that would grant authority to the Beaufort County School District Board of Trustees to adopt the district's annual operating budget and to establish the property tax millage rate for school district operations within the limits of state law. Proposed legislative language for consideration has been shared with the board's legislative lobbyist, Lynn Stokes Murray, and I will provide copies momentarily. All fiscal authority is limited and subject to cap under Act 388 based on inflation and growth. Of the 80 public school districts in the state, 1/3 have fiscal authority. Why is Beaufort not one of them? Beaufort County School District has a proven track record of fiscal responsibility with annual audits of no findings for over 20 consecutive years. A clean forensic audit of debt service in 2020 after the Beaufort County Auditor made some very damning public statements that were unfounded and disproven. And 2 recent audits of the P cards, our credit cards, which also had no findings. Greenville and Beaufort share the highest bond rating for school districts in the state, Moody's AA1. Greenville has fiscal authority, Beaufort does not. Why not? Currently, the school operating millage rate is set by the county, yet the school bond debt service millage rate is set by Beaufort County School District. Unfortunately, the school district has been left with significant operating revenue shortfalls totaling $19.3 million in the last 3 property tax reassessment years. These were tax years 2009, 13, and 18. This revenue shortfall has a negative impact on the district's ability to offer competitive salaries necessary to recruit and retain high-quality staff. The Beaufort County Board of Education is an elected public body and solely responsible for the educational outcomes of the budget. We answer to the public, the voters, just as you do and just as County Council does. The public spoke clearly and loudly when they overwhelmingly approved the largest ever school bond referendum in Beaufort County in 2019. The vast majority want decent, updated, safe school facilities and trust the board to deliver on that promise. The Board of Education membership is elected and subject to change every few years. Procedures and policies are in place to help ensure the continued outstanding track record of fiscal responsibility by Beaufort County School District. We have earned the reputation of fiscal responsibility. We ask your support. And I will provide you with the language. Thank you for listening.
Thank you. Thank you. Have you all, out of curiosity, has anybody held any public hearings on this issue, either county council or the school board, to let the public weigh in?
No public hearings. I mean, my answer to that would be they vote us to represent them. We're already representing them.
No, I get it.
Yeah.
This is an issue that goes back to when I was on county council.
Right.
I mean, it's been talked about that long.
I tried to lay out to you and the general public,
Right.
This is our track record. Why don't we have it? I believe we have earned it. I think we're deserving of it, and that's what I'm stating publicly.
Got it. Okay. Thank you.
You're welcome.
How do you pronounce that?
Tricia Fidrich.
Oh, I can't read it. Tricia Fidrich. Good morning. How are you today?
I'm well, thank you. My name is Tricia Fidrich. I am a member of the Beaufort County School District Board of Education. Ms. Erickson. I represent District 4, and I'm here also speaking as an individual. But I wanted to speak with you a little bit about a crisis that the nation is undergoing, a crisis that the state of South Carolina is undergoing, and a crisis that Beaufort County School District is undergoing, teacher shortage. Okay? We are in desperate need of teachers. Historic shortage. Reasons, COVID, Other reasons, pay, cost of living in Beaufort County, and so on. Beaufort County School District is being very creative in trying to attract and entice people to come to this area to live and to work and to teach in this profession. But my purpose today to speak to you, and thank you for this opportunity, didn't realize until listening to you today the myriad topics that you all deal with, so I greatly appreciate it. But I wanted to make you aware of the different hiring practices that are eligible for charter schools compared to public schools. Charter schools are allowed to have up to 25% of their staff hired as non-certified teachers. Public schools are not. So let me give you an example. Chairman Newton, let's say after you are finished with this amazing job on this delegation, and you say, I would love to teach a class in high school of civics. I would say you'd be well qualified. Beaufort County School District could not hire you to do so unless you enrolled in one of their alternative certification programs, which are quite onerous, and believe me, you wouldn't want to do it. But you would have so much to offer the students of Beaufort County School District with your experience and your knowledge. Charter schools could hire you. Beaufort County School District could not. Let's say you wanted to teach a finance class, Mr. Herb Kurzman. Mr. Rivers, let's say you wanted to come back to the school district and help teach. You can't do it unless you join under like Teach for America, PACE program, or something like that. We're just asking for you to consider, be aware of it when discussions come up, of the differences in the hiring practices. It puts the public school district at a disadvantage, whereas charter schools can go out and hire all this amazing talent that exists in Beaufort County. Retired people that physics, which is difficult to find, all right, any of those areas. I'm just asking you that when you speak to your colleagues, and just to be aware of the fact that this exists, and to allow us to have a level playing field where we could go out and hire very qualified people to teach in our classes, although they might not have the teaching pedagogy behind them. That is something we could do. That is something the school district could provide support for. But we need to get these content-rich individuals into our classrooms. So thank you for your time. Thank you for think about this when it comes up in conversations and being aware of this. I appreciate it. Well, we're looking at, we want full-time, right. So we try our very best to get substitute teachers that are content knowledgeable. But there's a dearth of substitute teachers, again, because of COVID, because of other opportunities, because of pay. I would greatly appreciate, I speak as an individual, but greatly appreciate your consideration of bringing this information forward and making a change if possible.
Absolutely.
Thank you. Yes, sir.
Is 25%?
That's my understanding, 25%. Charter schools can hire up to 25% of their staff non-certified, whereas public schools cannot. Now, granted, well, you can go through those programs. So like the PACE program, and Ms. Erickson, I'm sure, can speak knowledgeably about this as well. It's like a 3-year program. You have to go through all types of hoops and jump through all types of things to eventually say that you're qualified to teach in the classroom, even though you might have a huge amount of content knowledge. We can't capture you without saying you must also do this.
Got it. Okay. Thank you. Representative Erickson.
Trish, thank you so much for bringing this up. You know that, teachers are our most important piece of education. They're what bring and impart that knowledge. They work with our children and our families, and you cannot have a good education system without the teachers in the classroom. Just cannot. Right. I've tried at least 3 times to bring that 25% to our public school system, and it is routinely shot down by the State Department of Education and the state lobbying groups that don't want to see that happen. You are right. I am always given the excuse that, we have these programs that you can get into and you can do it. And if you are a PhD with aeronautics experience, I'll use our Marine Corps Air Station as probably one of our most rich, target-rich environments for those folks who might want to come in and teach, I don't know, say physics would be a great place to have them. Why in the world would we make someone who has served our country, has probably classified clearances of all kinds of things, and content knowledge, as you mentioned, then go to 3 years of jumping through the hoops to have educational psychology? And that's just one example. I will continue to try. I would tell you that when your school boards associations get together, it would be so huge for the state if the school board association would speak out on this as a statewide endeavor. Beaufort County has some movers and shakers and thinks outside the box. Go find your like-minded counterparts and help us do a statewide push. You've got legislators who would like to see it, but we get shut down by the status quo. And right now, and I haven't, you might have higher numbers than I do, around 100 teachers short still in Beaufort County right now, I think, certified teachers. Is that about right?
I think it might be more like 260.
Is
I
it
don't
higher?
remember
Okay.
right offhand, but
I mean, I know
it's-
we're hovering at 1,000 or better statewide.
Or better, I think more
And
like 1,500.
It's
Yeah.
no better in my world of early childhood education. Our Head Start is reporting the same problems, and we've got to think outside the box to bring these folks who aren't traditionally certified teachers. Having been on both sides of that coin, I can tell you, good teachers are born, not made.
Yeah.
And we need to embrace that. Thank you so much for talking about that subject and bringing it up.
Yes, sir,
Ms.
Ms.
Erickson.
Rivers.
Mr. Church, I have a question for you. I'm just curious about the impact it would have on the younger grades, someone who's professional in content but not professional in how to deal with younger people. I'm just curious because the older person, older students could adapt and adjust possibly to that type of teaching, but someone who has to be nurtured and taught different things, what do you think, how would that affect these 25% going into the public school?
So, Mr. Rivers, I think that the majority of the need where we would find in our community those experts would be for the higher level classes. So it's in things like Ms. Erickson mentioned, physics, chemistry, calculus, trigonometry. It's those areas that we find very difficult to fill the classrooms, all right, not as much the lower grades. So I understand your point. And believe me, as a former teacher myself, that teaching pedagogy is incredibly important, all right, learning about all those, the way to teach and the right way to teach and so on. But that type of stuff, that type of information can be supported to the newcomer to the classroom. All right, it's that content, it's that life experience that so many of our citizens here in Beaufort County could bring forward to our classrooms. So I understand your concern, but I'm mostly focusing like on the middle school, high school type of subjects like Algebra 2, trigonometry, calculus. Those would be the areas. Okay? Thank you so much for your consideration, and again, thank you very much for this meeting today.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Thank you all for what you all do as well. Anybody else here that would like to address us? Mr. Rodman, come on up. And while you're coming, let me ask you a question. Is County Council as a body taking a position on this fiscal autonomy question?
We haven't voted on it. We've talked about it in executive session. I don't believe there's any disagreement with where we are, but I will address it. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
I'm just curious. I mean, if the body itself has taken up a resolution one way and for or against.
We can do that if you like at some point in time. Before the
Curious.
Okay.
He's wearing his plaid. He's got his plaid on now.
I got it.
He's got his plaid on.
Heritage Week.
You have to. Anyway, thank you, Mr. Chairman, for the opportunity to speak. The history of the fiscal autonomy, I think, goes back to the time that you and I and Representative Rivers were dealing with this 18 years ago. Hard to believe. And if memory serves me, Mr. Representative Herb Kirsten, I'm sorry, you asked me at a delegation meeting, or right thereafter, about the concept of fiscal autonomy. And I said this has always been something that the school district has wanted. And you said, no way. And I said, but if you think about it, there may be an intermediate point called limited autonomy that might work. And if memory serves me, you said, okay, well, how might that work? And maybe we could consider something like that. So anyway, about a third of the districts have it full. About a third, it's like where it's totally under the control of the county council. And about a third are in the middle, which is kind of limited autonomy. Language has been drafted and discussed with various people that might solve the problem of approaching it from a limited standpoint. And I think it's fair to say from reading what you presented, the one and only difference is whether the millage rate is left to the school district or whether the millage rate is set by the county council. I don't think there's anything else that's in there. For example, both versions would essentially say that the school district should be vested in setting its own budget. So, 3 points in reading the language. Very interesting, and you read the title in it. It says, part of this is to remove archaic language providing that the Beaufort County Legislative Delegation is the budget authority for the operation of schools in Beaufort County. Mr. Chairman, I think if we had known this 18 years ago, you all could have been doing this for the last 18 years. So obviously it probably needs to get fixed. But here are the two operative sentences. Budget authority for the operation of schools in Beaufort County is hereby vested in the Beaufort County Board of Education. The second operative language is that the Beaufort County Council, after consulting with the County Boards of Education and considering its budget, mill values, reserves, and other factors, shall approve at its discretion a school millage for the next year. So I think the only difference again between what you presented and where I thought we were in our discussions that we were actually having with the administration and with the chair of the school board is whether or not you vest setting the millage with the school district or you leave that with the county council. Now, a couple things to think about as you do that. I do believe that teachers is really the key to this whole thing, as you pointed out. And what happens right now is that the school district goes through its long process of setting its budget. It then comes over to county council, and we take the better part of 2 months because we go through committee and have to go through 3 readings in order to approve both the budget and setting the millage. And then toward the end of June, with that all approved, the district's then in a position to go out and complete its hiring. But many of the districts that areas they're trying to hire from have already gone out and hired the teachers. And in fact, they probably lose some because they don't know what they can do from a pay standpoint. With what I'm suggesting, I think the reverse happens, is that the school district can zero in on the teachers that they want, get started early. They can come to county council and have that discussion about the millage. And it may be that we can't resolve it immediately, but I think most times what would happen is they'd say, okay, we think we can live within the millage that we have now, and if the county agrees, then we could go ahead and firm that up, and they'd be free to go earlier than they are now. Or it might be along the lines of, look, it looks like we're going to need an extra 2 mills to raise the teacher salaries, and we could agree on that. Then they could be tidying up the budget, and then we could come back to the millage at the end. Now, the real key language here is the 388. Remember, 388 is a cap. And what was being suggested by some of the members is that they would have the discretion to approve up to the cap. Well, we're all limited by the cap anyway, so the cap doesn't really apply. So the question is, do they have the authority to go up to the 388 cap, or does the council have the ability to set something lower? And I've challenged the school district to actually identify any place over the last 18 years where county council has restricted education. Mr. Chairman, you may remember 17 years ago, we were in a situation where, because of the tax-paying ability, we were getting strangled by the amount of money that the district was getting from the state. So the state money was declining, and without a big increase. So we actually put through one really very big increase. Two other things that the council did along the way. One was they pushed the school district to get into computers faster and said, we're happy to have a millage increase. And we were the ones that pushed them to address the teacher salary, which is the supplement that's in place now. So I think the only issue that's on the table, I think it's good to get it fixed. If you want to give them full authority, that's one thing. If you want to leave the setting of the millage with us, we're happy to do that, whatever you would like. I don't think there's anything else that's in disagreement.
Yes, sir. Mr. Curtis. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Stu, I'll take ownership on that comment that I made about no way, no how.
I hope I didn't say the wrong thing.
But no, it's, I mean, we gotta live and die by what we do. But that was pre-Act 388 and also at the advice and explanation of then current school board members. I mean, since then I've talked with Christina a good bit when she was chair, and have it opened up to the possibility on that, the distinct possibility on that. So I just want to clarify that. And also, has there ever been in just recent history, a lack of congruency between the county council and the board members on education?
I don't think so, in the sense that what we've had is 2 or 3 times when we get into when we go through a reassessment in the county. Sometimes it gets a little bit difficult to figure out what the millage values are because of all the moving pieces. But the better measure, I think, to your point, is what has happened with the reserves. And I think the reserves have grown very, very nicely at the school district over time. I think they were in the 5 to 10 million back in our day, and I don't know what they are now, but I'm guessing they're probably north of 30 million. So that's probably the best measure, to your point, of whether we've ever shorted them.
Yes, sir. Mr. Rip.
Hey, Stu. I guess what I'm hearing you saying that the school district has authority, but county council has the control.
What I'm trying to say is that everybody seems to agree that they ought to have the authority to set their whole budget. Whatever they want to do in the budget, they're elected, they're closer to it than anybody else, they ought to set the budget. The only question is, at the end of the day, do they get to set the millage, or should county council set the millage considering the budget and other factors such as mill values?
So the reserves, I mean, so it's been established that the school district has been very frugal with their money over the years. So what would be an impediment to having total physical autonomy, since they have such a good record?
I think it really comes back to, frankly, where you all want that to lie. Do you want that with the Board of Education, which is elected, or do you want it with the county council, which is elected?
No, I understand that part, but hearing your argument, you're saying, what I heard you say is that the school district has done an excellent job with their finances. It's been ongoing. So if they're good, and they have been good, they should continue to be good. So you shouldn't have a problem with them doing what they've always been doing.
I think they've done a good job. I don't disagree with that. When I was there, I actually welcomed having somebody look over my shoulder and agree with what we were suggesting to the public.
So what would be the 3 steps we could use? I know you said with third have physical autonomy, a third of the counties do, and the third is limited. So what would be your suggestion?
My suggestion was believing that full autonomy was not something that the delegation was interested in, is that limited autonomy was a good compromise and perhaps a good first step to full autonomy. With again, the only difference being who sets the millage.
Right. Thank you.
Any other questions for Mr. Rodman?
Ms. Erickson?
I looked it up. I actually have the file of running reserve accounts. Beaufort County's 48 million as of my last check. Not to be outdone by Greenville, that's got $298 million in reserves. I think it's, Christina, is it 10% that you're required to have?
I believe it's 15 to 17%, and that was a vote by the board, maybe 2 or 3 years ago. We have an excellent financial advisor who advises, obviously, the school board how much we should have in reserve, and we're not advised to keep going higher and higher. We use a lot of the reserves, of course, to do our projects over the summers for maintenance primarily, our 8% projects. Those are based on 8%. We can borrow up to 8% of the total assessed values in the county. So we are not trying to build an enormous reserve. That is not our intention.
I didn't mean to insinuate you did. I was asking what the state requires 10%.
Yeah, and I believe
what would that be?
I don't know off the top of my head.
Okay. I would say that's where
15 to 17% is what we're doing, and that's what we're advised to do because that gives us the good credit rating for borrowing. And right now, the board actually is the one who does decide the tax millage rate for the school bonds for debt service. So we already have the authority for one half. We just would like the authority for the operating half.
I think this is a bigger conversation for a sit-down room where people aren't waiting on us to figure out what we decide. But I think it's really good that we're having the conversation. Stu, I appreciate the information on and the thoughtfulness on making sure that the district has the ability to make decisions on their largest expenditure, which is teacher salaries. Because that's really what we've got to hone down and make sure we're doing, is giving them the ability to offer those contracts as early as possible with the idea of planning and bringing in the best teachers for our county. So I think that's the key to it all, is figuring how we do that. So I appreciate the information and look forward to working with everybody to try to make that happen.
Okay.
Other questions or comments? Thank you, Mr. Roberts.
Thank you.
Appreciate you being here. Okay, any other comments? Anybody else would like to address us? Yes, sir.
Can I make one more?
Sure. And while you got our attention, while we're here.
This is just one for information, and it has to do with the section of road along 170. Essentially, a couple of years ago, the LOCOG did studies that looked at short-term, medium-term, and long-term improvements to that section. And about a year ago, not too much was happening, and as the county got into it, they essentially said, look, we got to go fix this. And today where we stand is they're finishing up the design for that first phase of 170. Jasper has joined with us. We think that Hardyville will be part of that. And DOT is looking at a repaving piece that would normally happen a year later, and that would get folded into it. So that's good. And really the leadership on all of that has been Jared Fralix, he's our chief engineer, and Craig Gordon. And they've done some wonderful jobs. But that kind of led to a discussion about the so-called triangle, which would be 170, Argent, and 278. So they've started looking at that as a group. And in their discussions with DOT, it appears that a logical path forward might be a design build on some of those sections. And in order to do that, there's probably about $2-3 million worth of pre-engineering that would need to be there in place before you could start to bid something that is a design build. And I think between ourselves, some leftover money from the 2006 referendum, assuming Jasper comes in, I think we could probably take care of that. Now, the reason for mentioning this to you is I think this is a great opportunity for the region, and it checks almost all of the boxes. From a regional standpoint, it's probably the most failing section of road, maybe more so than the bridges to Hilton Head. Had several fatalities in that particular area, The access management plans are done on 2 of the 3 legs of it. It really forces Beaufort and Jasper to work together on the planning of 170. And as you know, the road is the dividing line, and so having different development plans on each side makes it kind of different. It helps with the workforce, because we've got a lot of workforce that's getting tied up. It's not just on the bridges, but it's there. And it's one of those that is kind of difficult to put on a referendum because it spans two different counties. So I only mention it because I think it is a great opportunity for our region to step up and get that done. And who knows, maybe 2 or 3 years from now, that might be our next best opportunity to ask for some SIB funding. So just let you know that that's going on, and keep it in mind. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Rodman, and appreciate your sharing that. A couple of us, I think in different groups, had the opportunity to visit with the chairman and the administrator and Jared in Columbia earlier this year about that triangle that you're talking about, and I share your concerns. I mean, it's a little bit deja vu of thinking back to the late 90s and talking about 278 being 2 lanes and connecting it out to I-95. But that is an incredibly important area, and I do think it's going to become one of the more significant traffic concerns in the county. Yes. Anybody else got questions, thoughts while we're here? All good? Anybody else here that would like to thank you all for being here? You know, assuming that we don't have other scheduling challenges, we likely will do this again early in the summer, with the June, July time frame, but trying to schedule all of us being here is a challenge. Please know Ms. Maxey is in the county building. She's our liaison with you all and with the public. If you need us, you're certainly welcome to reach out to any of us individually. I say that because my colleagues echo that, and I've heard them individually say it. I'm not committing them to something they don't commit themselves to reach out to us directly, but also to reach out to Ms. Maxey to get to us collectively. So, yes, sir.
Can I say one thing? I want to congratulate Ms. Maxey on 7 years service. We have a 10-year contract here that we're going to have her sign before it's all over.
Actually, I think you get a pin from Beaufort County after you've been here 10 years. Isn't that right, Mr. Greenway? It's not a fancy watch, but it is a little pin that you can wear of some kind. But in any event, thank all of you all for being here. It's a privilege for us to get to, along with you all, serve the citizens of this part of South Carolina. I hope everybody has a wonderful heritage and a happy Easter. And y'all take care and have a great day. Thanks very much. We're adjourned.
The County Channel is also available on video on demand. Go to BeaufortCountySC.gov, scroll down to Public Meetings, click Watch Now, and then click the Video on Demand button and select your program from the list.
Call the meeting to order.
If you'd like a DVD of this program, click on the link on the right and fill out the order form. And thank you for watching the County Channel.
This is Larry Rowland. This is a Beaufort County moment. The subject of this moment is the phosphate industry. Lost to folks today, but the artifacts of the phosphate industry are around us if we look for them. Phosphates were known in South Carolina before the Civil War. They were first discovered up around Somerville and north of Charleston. It's known as marl, and beneath the marl was the phosphate rock. Geologists and scientists knew about it. Phosphate was very important to the agriculture of the South because it is the basis of most fertilizer, and many of the cotton lands of the Old South were much exhausted by the cotton industry before the war. So after the Civil War, the phosphate industry was introduced first in Charleston in 1867. And then looking for beds of high content phosphate rock, these phosphate explorers and entrepreneurs discovered Beaufort County. The next 30 years, Beaufort County became the primary source of phosphate in the United States and one of the richest sources of phosphates known in the world between 1870 and 1900. This became the center of the mining part of the phosphate industry. Many of the fertilizer factories were in Charleston, but the mining and the phosphate works, as they called them, where they broke the rock down into powder and to pure phosphate and shipped it out, those industrial centers were mostly in Beaufort County. At the height of this industry in the 1880s, 3,000 Beaufortonians were employed in the phosphate business. It paid good wages, $5 a day in many cases, was a rule of thumb. When the phosphate business began in the 1870s, the richest veins of phosphate were underwater, under the Coosaw River, under the Beaufort River, under Battery Creek. So initially, local Sea Islanders would dive down for the rock and fill up baskets and then get pulled up in a rope. Not only limiting the depth to which they could mine at, but limiting their health as well, going up and down. But very quickly in the 1870s, engineers discovered that they could build very large underwater steam-powered dredges on floating barges. And so they began to mechanize the industry, and rather than employing fewer people, it actually employed more. More than half of the phosphate produced in the United States and 80% of the phosphate produced in South Carolina came from Beaufort County. The phosphate industry between 1870 and 1900 was the largest industry in the history of Beaufort County and the largest mining industry in the history of the state of South Carolina. And people have pretty much forgotten about it. But it was the source of great prosperity in Beaufort County between 1870 and 1890. The population of Beaufort County grew. Bay Street became a financial and commercial center. Phosphate works, in other words, factories where they burned the phosphate rock and broke it down into powder, were located on Spanish Point, were located on Lucy Creek, and the largest was located first on Coosaw Plantation and then out at the end of Chisholm Highland on Summerhouse Point on the north side of the Coosaw River. Smaller phosphate companies and phosphate dredges and the tugboats and the support systems that had to support this industry for 30 years were an enormous boon to Beaufort County. Eventually, these smaller phosphate companies were consolidated into one very large company called the Coosaw Mining Company. The Coosaw Mining Company by 1892 was the largest phosphate mining company in the United States. But in those same years, in 1888, richer veins of phosphate were discovered near Tampa, Florida. And during the 1890s, the percentage of phosphate extracted from Beaufort County declined, and the percentage of phosphate discovered and extracted from Florida and other places like near Nashville, Tennessee, was richer phosphate, and eventually it put these phosphate mines out of business. Phosphate in Beaufort County, the River Rock as it was called in those days, was 60% pure phosphate, which in 1870 was the best in the country. By 1888, the Florida Rock was 80% pure phosphate, and the economics of that simply put the Beaufort County phosphate business out of business. The Coosaw Mining Company stopped mining in 1905. The Virginia Carolina Company tried to consolidate some of the old works and finally went bankrupt in 1914, and that was the bitter end of the phosphate business. A consequence of the end of the phosphate business was the beginning of the great exodus of the African American population of the Sea Islands, who without good wage jobs began to move north and depopulated much of Beaufort County. But the other event which hastened the demise of the phosphate industry in Beaufort County was, of course, the Great Hurricane of 1893, which was one of the 10 largest hurricanes and most destructive hurricanes ever to hit the United States, killed as many as 2,000 people on the Sea Islands, and wrecked the phosphate fleet. So the investors in the phosphate fleet moved their capital to Florida, and the phosphate business declined in Beaufort County. This is Larry Rowland. This has been a Beaufort County Moment.
To see more Beaufort County moments, go to the Beaufort County Library homepage and click on the Local History tab.
Dr. Gates, tell me a little bit about the timeliness of the Reconstruction series. Why now?
12 years of black freedom, followed by an alt-right rollback. A president immediately following Abraham Lincoln who refused to renounce white supremacy. A conservative Supreme Court that effectively undid the power of the 14th and 15th Amendments. What's that sound like?
Contemporary times.
Contemporary times. So it was obvious that we could teach our fellow citizens in America about the perilous moment in which we're living by analogy through telling the story of Reconstruction and its rollback. And I first started thinking about it after the horrible murders of Reverend Clementa Pinckney and the other innocents at Mother Emanuel Church, because the justifications that Dylann Roof summoned for his actions were very reminiscent of racist rhetoric about black people immediately following the Civil War and following Reconstruction. And I was shocked. It's almost like a horror movie when you think that the vampire's dead and all of a sudden they come up out of the casket and you think, damn, I thought I put a stake in your heart. I thought that the worst and most pernicious and heinous aspects of anti-black white supremacy were long gone, and I was naive about that. And we've seen a rise in hate speech, anti-Semitism, anti-gay attitudes, and when people become frightened, particularly about their economic future, they look for scapegoats. And the scapegoats traditionally have been Jewish people, women, gay people, and of course in this country, people of color. So it's a moral, a lesson. Let's don't go back to what happened with the rollback to Reconstruction.
Reconstruction is such an important part of American history, and yet it is so misunderstood. Why is that? Why is it that we don't have a better understanding of this period and what it actually meant?
Well, W.E. Du Bois wrote a book in 1935 called Black Reconstruction. And one chapter is called The Propaganda of History. And he analyzes how white historians had written about Reconstruction. And that was part of the rollback, to create a mythology of black incompetence, that black men had been elected to office and couldn't properly serve, that black voters had been manipulated by northern scallywags and carpetbaggers, that basically they were tools and pawns, that they were dishonest. Robert Smalls was one of the greatest heroes of the Civil War and Reconstruction, served 5 non-consecutive terms in Congress because he was constantly being accused yet of stealing money and misappropriating funds. There was a mythology sanctioned by the discipline of history located at Columbia University called the Dunning School, led by historian Professor Dunning. And they found every way to traduce the achievements of black people. And that has only been undone by historians since Du Bois published Black Reconstruction, and most notably under the leadership of another Columbia professor, Professor Eric Foner, with whom we made our Reconstruction series. He was our chief consultant. Plus, we have over 40 historians doing modern, cutting-edge scholarship on Reconstruction, whom we feature in the series. So it's very much a collective series, and it's very much a counterpoint to the received interpretations of Reconstruction fabricated by the Dunning School.
Well, for us,
this is the Foner School.
The Foner School. For us in South Carolina, it has a very special meaning. Why is the state of South Carolina so pivotal to an understanding of Reconstruction?
South Carolina was ground zero for Reconstruction because it was a majority black state. There's a famous 1872 lithograph of the first colored senator and the members of the House of Representatives, and 3 of those men in that lithograph were from South Carolina. When Richard T. Greener graduated from Harvard, the first black man to graduate from Harvard in the class of 1870, where was the land of opportunity? Was it in New York? Was it in Boston? Was it in Philadelphia? Charleston. Came to Charleston and went to Columbia and served on the faculty and took law classes there. A black man from England, from Liverpool, England, Robert Brown Elliott, came to Boston in 1867 with the British Navy, could smell the opportunity, headed straight to South Carolina and worked for Richard Harvey Kane's newspaper, then was elected to Congress. Very eloquent man. And this was where it was at. This is where it was happening. And when I interviewed Representative Clyburn, his office in the Congress.
Well, he's long been a student of Reconstruction.
Yeah, I mean, it's like a museum. You go in there and all these brothers are on the wall. And we talked about the fact that South Carolina had a black majority in the House of Representatives. You can't imagine that now. South Carolina, even in the 18th century, was called Negro country. It was a black state. And very soon that was dismantled. So it's no surprise that many of the most vicious battles over race occurred here, because it was an attempt to control this black majority. I went to Calhoun College at Yale University, and John C. Calhoun was an intellectual racist. He not only wanted slavery to continue, he wanted to resurrect the slave trade. He was a rough brother.
What do you feel were the most important and most significant aspects of Reconstruction, the real positives?
The establishment of black social institutions, particularly the churches, fraternal organizations, social organizations, the fact that so many of the slaves wanted to get married and legalize their love relationships, the taking out of ads in newspapers to reunite families, and the fact that 80% of the eligible black men in the South registered to vote in what I call the first Freedom Summer, the summer of 1867, and 500,000 of them cast their votes in the general election of 1868 for Ulysses S. Grant. That's amazing. And people formed schools, historically black, what we now call historically black colleges and universities like Shaw and Howard, but elementary schools.
And in South Carolina, Allen and Benedict and Claflin.
Absolutely. And, you know, just elementary schools that the slaves had a hunger for learning because they knew that the most valuable thing that had been kept for them was knowledge of reading and writing. And they knew that was the pathway to success.
Isn't it interesting that public education grew out of this period, and particularly was spearheaded here in our state by Robert Smalls?
Right. There weren't statewide public school systems. And the Reconstruction governments, particularly in South Carolina, and particularly as designed by Robert Smalls, established statewide public school educational systems, which hadn't been done before, which is a shock to people. And that's because black people understood the value of education.
It's also interesting, though, that things like public education and certainly enfranchisement and economic development, all these positives that grew out of the Reconstruction period are still under assault in modern times.
Yeah, it is. And we have to, any society is judged by the quality of its public education. And we as Americans should be embarrassed at how we've allowed our public schools, which are populated by brilliant teachers who are so motivated, but they're underpaid and under-resourced. And we should be ashamed of that.
You know, people have a general idea that the collapse of Reconstruction was solely in the hands of the South. That's not true, is it?
No, the collapse of Reconstruction was a conspiracy between economic interests and political interests in the North and in the South. They said 12 years is enough. There was the economic panic of 1873, which was called the First Great Depression. And people looked around and said, why we spend all the money on these Negroes in the South? Let them thrive. They're free now. And they acted barrel as if 200 years of slavery could be wiped out with no reparations, with no benefits given, no 40 acres and a mule, no help. That each of these people were on their own. Not only that, new forms of oppression were institutionalized. Debt peonage, sharecropping.
The rise of the Klan.
The rise of the coup, terrorism. And so very much Reconstruction is about issues that still roil our society today. Who has the right to be a citizen? Who has the right to be an American? What is the relationship between political and economic democracy, and what is the role of terrorism in the healthy functioning of a democracy? What's the role of the chief executive in the face of the manifestations of terrorism?
How can we have this very blatant reminder from 150 years ago and not be mindful of its impact today?
That's why Dylan McGee and I made this series. And with PBS, we'll get, and I am on the road. You know, I flew down to Beaufort from Harvard. I did my official duties. I jumped on JetBlue and came down here because I wanted a South Carolina screening to remind people that this is ground zero, that then is now. And I want to do one in Charleston, and I want to do one at the Penn Center as well. It is very important that the country understand that we made this series about the current racial climate in the United States, though it's through the mirror and the analogy of Reconstruction and its rollback called redemption.
One final question. What is the measure of success for you for this series?
First of all, I want Reconstruction modules. First, I want Reconstruction modules to be created in the classroom so that Reconstruction is as central to a course in American history as the Civil War is, or World War I or World War II. Reconstruction was our first experiment with interracial democracy, and it was crushed. And the only way that we're going to survive as a society is if we fashion forms of interracial democracy and collaboration that allow a multiplicity of voices, sexual orientations, religious beliefs, etc., gender identities, to thrive and live in harmony and peace. That's my goal in creating this series, and I hope people will watch it.
Dr. Henry Louis Gates, Jr., thank you.
Thank you. I can talk to you all day. It's always a pleasure.
One in 3 adults has pre-diabetes. That means it could be you, your dog walker,
on your left,
your cat jogger. With early diagnosis, pre-diabetes can be reversed. Take the risk test at doihaveprediabetes.org.